Chapter 4. For the next few days, the city did not boil, but it simmered. Economic conditions had been unsettled for several years. Now panic approached. Then investors speculated wildly, buying up crop futures, anticipating government spending on the military. The Pony Express terminal became jammed with visitors awaiting the latest news from St. Joseph, Missouri. Bemused, Joshua scanned the newspapers, remembering his own past ventures in capitalism. Some men would grow rich from all this, while others would be ruined. The reports were confused and vague. Movements of troops, militias called up. Joshua wondered what he might do to ease the situation. The Congress should have complied with his proclamation and disbanded. Then this mess would never have happened. Buxby dropped in for his weekly visit. He had a newspaper under his arm. "There's an item from St. Louis about one of our former citizens," he remarked. "Who might that be?" "This fellow Sherman. He's been running a local railroad company back there. It says he's decided to accept a commission as colonel in the army. He'll be traveling to Washington next month, it says here. Perhaps you knew him. William Tecumseh Sherman." Of course. Joshua nodded. Lately, the daily news tended to make him weary. He thought perhaps he should see Dr. Luck again for more of his concoction to make him less sad. He said to Buxby, "I recall him well. He ran a bank in town for 2 or 3 years. It failed. From what I heard, the man has failed at every endeavor. No doubt he will botch his army job as well." "I shouldn't be surprised. What did you have planned for today, Your Majesty?" Joshua rose from his chair. He felt a need for some kind of action, anything. "Today is steamer day. I thought I might stroll down to the wharf to greet my new immigrants." "Excellent idea. I shall accompany you." The two went out together. San Francisco was not a large city. One could walk easily from one side of town to the other in 2 or 3 hours. It did not take them long to reach Meg's Wharf. There was an unusually large crowd gathered, many of them well-dressed businessmen. A number of young men, apparently intending to debark, guarded their steamer trunks or bags. They were a curious group, some well-heeled, judging by the quality of their luggage, others in workmen's clothes and shouldering canvas sacks. Emperor Norton, as usual, strode through the crowd, which parted for him. Buxby at his heels. Shielding his eyes with his cap, he gazed out across the bay. A side-wheel steamer approached from just off Alcatraz. "I see we're in time." Then to a nearby man wearing a stovepipe hat, "Pray, sir, what ship is that?" "Brother Jonathan," the man replied. He glanced at Norton with no sign of surprise. "She'll be turning around for Panama run as soon as she recoals. Some of the men here are headed east to join the army." He stopped and glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Some are from the south and some for the north. Should be an interesting voyage." "I dare say. Why are all these others here? Are we expecting special cargo?" The man shrugged. "No more than usual inbound, far as I know. But she'll be picking up a load of gold bars bound for Washington. Or there may be some going to the south. I wouldn't know. The prices have gone up again. Gold is in demand. As for myself, I'm down from Sacramento for a shipment of farming supplies while it's still available. I run a dry goods store up there. No telling what will happen to commerce in the next few weeks." He turned and took a closer look at Norton, scanning him up and down. "I see you are in uniform, sir. Would you be here on army business then?" Buxby stepped forward. "You are from out of town, my friend, so of course you wouldn't know. This is Joshua Norton the First, Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico." "Ah, I see. Glad to make your acquaintance, Emperor." Then the stranger turned and moved quickly away with a nervous glance over his shoulder. Buxby and the Emperor waited to see the ship dock and to watch passengers disembark. Not like the old days, Joshua remarked, watching a couple with 3 children make their way down the gangplank. What do you mean? When I arrived here during the rush, there were hardly any women or children, hardly any city for that matter. Times change, sometimes for the better. Buxby gave a short laugh. Sometimes. A small boy ran ahead of his family, pelting down the dock, ignoring his parents' pleas to stop. He came to a halt before Emperor Norton, staring up at him with wide eyes. Greetings, young man, Joshua said. He extended a hand. I am Emperor Norton the First, sovereign of the United States and protector of Mexico. I hereby welcome you to California. The boy's father caught up with him and pulled him away. Sorry if he's bothering you, sir. He did a double take at Joshua's uniform. Not at all. Welcome to San Francisco, sir. As the two moved away, Buxby laughed again. I bet he'll remember that the rest of his life. All part of my job, Joshua said. Back in the city, various newspapers were putting out new posters. The riverboat arrived from Sacramento with its Pony Express dispatches. Envelopes stuffed with messages on tissue paper went out to the various journals. Editors scanned the tiny, crabbed copy from Eastern correspondents and tried to figure out what they meant to say. Then they composed brief versions for the public posters and set out to create more coherent accounts for following editions of the papers. As a result, no one really understood what was going on. Nevertheless, crowds gathered in the streets scanning posters or buying papers. Buxby returned to his office while Joshua made his way from one newspaper to another, gathering what information he could. He had to remind himself the news was still at least 10 days behind. What seemed to be happening now had already occurred, like the arrival of light from a distant star. He remembered tomorrow was Friday, and he'd promised to show Sarah around Chinatown. Perhaps she would take his mind off these matters. Joshua called on Sarah late the next morning, but only after he had been handed another worry. This took the form of a written note from Marina. It came in a faintly scented envelope sealed with wax. It said, Joshua, today some men called upon me, representing themselves as attorneys. They would not tell me who has hired them. They asked many questions about yourself, which I was unwilling or unable to answer. I am concerned about you. I wish you would visit me as soon as possible, as I may be leaving the city soon to travel east. Should I come to your rooming house? That might be more private. Marina. He wondered why she would be traveling east. He did not concern himself about attorneys, since he had dealt with them many times before, but he should like to see Marina at least once before she left. He dashed off a note to her asking her to come to his room that evening. He paid his landlord's boy a dime to deliver it. Sarah met him in her hotel lobby. She wore a dark brown coat with no sign of jewelry or wealth. Time for our adventure, she said. They walked a few blocks north to the edge of Chinatown. I'm afraid I don't know as much about Chinatown as you appear to think I do, he said. I know only one person there at all well. And who might that be? My physician, Dr. Luck. You have a Chinese doctor? She sounded scandalized, but he didn't seem to notice. Yes, he's helped me a good deal. Perhaps you would like to meet him. If he's not too busy, that is. His office isn't far. The streets of Chinatown were crowded as usual, crowded and noisy and full of arcane smells. They passed a butcher shop with live chickens in cages and an herbalist with more strange aromas. Sarah was taking it all in. As they reached the building where Dr. Luck had his office, they heard a distant sound of shouts and angry words. They didn't stop to listen, but instead entered and climbed the stairs. They found the doctor standing out on the landing, peering through a side window. Ah, my dear Emperor and a lady, I fear you have chosen an unfortunate time to visit. Sarah asked, Why? What's going on? I think a Tong war. I'm not sure. The rabble from outside have been attacking our places of business, burning laundries and so on. Most unfortunate. The Tongs do not wish to fight back. Instead, they fight between themselves. Stupid, I know, but there you are. I shall write a letter to the governor demanding he do something, Joshua said. In fact, I shall issue a proclamation. Perhaps that will help. In the meantime, it appears the riot is moving in this direction. I suggest we evacuate. Sarah looked alarmed. Is it safe to go out in the street? Probably not. Dr. Luck gave a polite smile. As I say, you chose an unfortunate time to visit. Forgive me, Doctor. Joshua held a hand in Sarah's direction. I have neglected to introduce you. This is Miss Sarah Althea Hill, and may I present Dr. Luck. The doctor bowed. An honor, madam, though I fear there's little time for formality. By now, they could hear shouts and crashes rising from the street. If you will follow me, please. He turned and plunged down the stairs without looking back to see if they complied. Sarah's skirts prevented her from moving as quickly, but she and Joshua descended as fast as possible. At the bottom of the stairwell, they found Dr. Luck holding a back door open. He had a lighted lantern. There were clatters and bangs from the front door, and somewhere the sound of breaking glass. Quick, quick, the doctor said. The door shut behind them, and they found themselves on another staircase leading down into darkness. Sarah followed the doctor, urged on by noises from above. Joshua came last. They found a dank basement lined with brick. Joshua had to remove his hat and bend over to avoid the ceiling. Dr. Luck moved across the room, which was cluttered with barrels and dusty boxes. This way, the doctor stopped at a large packing crate marked with Oriental characters. He lifted one corner, motioning for Joshua to help. Joshua took the opposite corner, and they both lifted. Underneath was a dark hole with 5 wooden steps leading downward. My God, Sarah said, I'm not going down there. It would be unwise to remain here, the Dr. Luck said. There was another loud crash that sounded as if it came from directly above. Joshua went down the steps and held his hand up for Sarah, looking as white as a sheet. She took his hand and came down. Dr. Luck came last, lowering the packing crates. The lantern light revealed a narrow tunnel, barely high enough to stand in. Joshua, in fact, had to bend over. It appeared to be carved from solid rock. There was a trickle of dirty water on the floor. Carved from sandstone, the doctor explained. It goes about 2 blocks north. It was made by opium smugglers. He moved on down the tunnel. Are there rats? Sarah spoke in nearly a whisper, as if afraid someone would hear. Only a few, Dr. Luck said. Perfectly safe. Do opium smugglers still use it? Joshua asked. Only a few. By the time they emerged from the tunnel, Sarah decided she'd seen enough of Chinatown. This has been more of an adventure than I bargained for, she said, brushing dust from a sleeve. My dress is filthy. I was hoping we might sample a nice restaurant while we're here, Joshua suggested. Not today, I think. Not today, I think. You may escort me back to my hotel, please. They were in a warehouse used for storing wagons and carts. Horse and mule tack hung from the ceiling. This end of the tunnel was not disguised. It opened into a small room within the warehouse, with a door locked on the inside. When Dr. Luck closed the door behind them, the latch snapped shut. Will the rioters damage your office? Joshua asked. I don't think so. They have no quarrel with me. but it is best to avoid the neighborhood of riots. Probably I shall be treating some of the wounded later. Miss Hill, it has been an honor. I hope you will not judge us harshly because of this incident. Please come again on a more peaceful day. Sarah only nodded in response. She turned toward the door, and Joshua caught up with her. They found themselves on DuPont Street near the business district. Perhaps I should summon a carriage, Joshua said. Never mind. It could take forever to find one. Come on, I can still walk, inconvenient though it be. She set off striding east, her heels clacking on the sidewalk boards. It occurred to Joshua that she might be out of sorts for some reason. He started to apologize. Please, don't say another thing, she said. Then, you do have some odd friends. Joshua nodded. On thinking it over, he supposed she was right. Opium smugglers? Marina asked that evening. Preoccupied as he was, Joshua had nearly forgotten about her promised visit. She had appeared shortly after he had returned from spending 50 cents on dinner at a nearby cafe. He'd had to spend American money since the place would no longer accept his script. Is your doctor in that line of work? Oh, no. Well, I assume he uses opium in his practice, so I suppose he must obtain it from someone. But Dr. Luck explained to me that the Chinese sell most of their contraband to white people. We're the ones who keep them in business. He had related the day's adventures to her at once. She listened with a quizzical expression. Miss Hill takes quite an interest in you. I wonder what she has in mind. Joshua shrugged. Some people, especially ladies, wish to associate with royalty. No offense intended. She smiled. None taken. And you are indeed royalty. Then her expression turned serious. But about these gentlemen I mentioned in my note, from what they let slip, I gather they believe you have a concealed treasure somewhere. I suspect they are maneuvering to have you arrested on some pretext so that your room can be searched. I only wish I knew who hired them. Joshua gazed about the tiny room. It shouldn't take them long to search. I fear they wouldn't find much, except, of course, for the crown jewels. She lifted an eyebrow. Jewels? I wasn't aware you had any. Only a little. He moved to the old wooden dresser by his bed. Opening the bottom drawer, he reached under some socks and linen to pull out a small tin box. He returned to Marina and popped open the lid. She looked in with a blank expression. You can hold them in the light if you wish, he said. Marina took the box. They almost look like real diamonds. But they are real. He watched as she took one between thumb and forefinger and held it so it was between her eye and the gaslight. I brought them from South Africa when I came here in 49. I had some cash and these few gems in a pouch around my neck. I couldn't bear to part with them. You see, whenever the legislature gets around to providing me with quarters suitable for my station, I plan to have them mounted in a golden crown. Of course, it would be worn only for affairs of state. In the meantime, I take them out now and then to cheer me up. Marina stirred the contents of the box with a fingertip. Your Highness, if these are indeed real, they're worth a fortune. You could buy a mansion on Nob Hill. Ah, but some things may not be bought or sold. He retrieved the box and replaced it. Like the jewels of state. Perhaps you should put them in a safer place, she said. Yes, you're probably right. I shall attend to that tomorrow. I do thank you for your warning. Tomorrow brought more bad news, or at least rumors of bad news. Reports from the East caused only more confusion. Several southern states had declared their independence. Near Sacramento, secessionist partisans robbed a stagecoach of its gold. Joshua read every newspaper he could get his hands on, though they were often a day or two old, found in trash barrels or left on lunch counters. Bands of men were organizing to march east or to sail by ship. General Fremont, lately of California, was heading for Missouri. Hundreds of newsmen had hundreds of guesses about what would happen next. Later that week, Joshua met Marina again at her hotel, this time to see her off. He rode with her in a horse car down Market Street to the ferry boats. I wish you would remain here, he told her, if only for your safety. She shook her head. There's no safety anymore, not now. She had only one small valise with her, not even a steamer trunk. She'd left most of her clothes in storage at her rooming house. And besides, I'm not making a living here. Back east, there are thousands of men in uniform, hungry for entertainment. I can sing for them as well as dance. If that doesn't work out, I thought I might find employment at a hospital. There will be wounded to help. Many wounded, I'm afraid. The car's bell clanged several times, loud enough to drown out words. He said, They say the war, if it comes, won't last more than a few days. They always say that, don't they? For a moment, she looked older than her years. From the Journal of Sarah Althea Hill. The senator has been most sweet and considerate of late. Last night he presented me with a nice necklace of sapphire and garnets, and yet he insisted on returning to Nevada this morning. It's all this commotion about civil unrest and secession and so forth. I do wish they'd have done with that nonsense. The senator, in fact, uses the situation as an excuse to avoid speaking of marriage. I'm not sure how much longer my patience will endure. I related to the senator my little sojourn with the emperor in the underground of Chinatown. The senator laughed and seemed to consider the whole affair some sort of joke. He may think I made the whole thing up, though he wouldn't say so. It's obvious the emperor is involved with opium smugglers and is only feigning madness as a way of covering up his true activities. Something must be done about him. Joshua watched Marina board the ferry and saw her wave to him from the deck as it steamed northward. He stood looking after it a long time. The boat would convey her to Sacramento, where she would board a stage bound for the east and far Missouri. He wondered when he would see her again, if ever. He chuckled a little, recalling their final conversation aboard the horse car. Nothing ever bothers you, she said. Have you never lost your temper? I have, at least once. It was over that cartoon. Which cartoon was that? The one depicting me at the same free lunch counter as those two flea-ridden curs, Lazarus and Bummer. I'm sure you have seen it. Yeah, she suppressed a smile. I'm afraid I have. It was posted in the window of a shop front. I'm afraid I lost my good manners. Without thinking, I raised my stick and smashed the window. I'm afraid I should not have done that. No, she said, but then it was an awful cartoon. She burst into giggles. Then he did as well. He shook his head, remembering. He would remember Marina a long time. A few days later, Sarah had occasion to meet with a certain off-duty police officer. They sat at opposite sides of a table in a small lunchroom not far from the Montgomery block. Now, do you understand what I want done? She stirred some sugar into her tea. Sure, I don't see no problems, ma'am. You were recommended to me by those detectives I hired. They said, when you take a bribe, you stay bribed. Is that true? In response, he shrugged and grinned, as if embarrassed. Sarah withdrew a small envelope from her reticule and pushed it across the table. He snatched it and shoved it inside his jacket, glancing quickly about. I want to search his room myself, she said. I could have had those men do it, but I don't know how far to trust them. I'm trusting you to bring me the key at once. Otherwise, I will have you exposed for corruption. Do you understand? He held onto his grin. No need for that sort of talk, ma'am. You can rely on me for sure. Anyway, his expression changed to one of sincerity. It's not like I'm the only fellow who takes a little extra now and then. No, in fact, I sometimes believe every single man in the city government is corrupt. Mark my words, it will be different when women get the vote. She glanced through the paneled window at the street. Recently, I was privileged to see a tunnel beneath the streets of Chinatown. The city we see by daylight is only the surface. There's a whole other city below street level, which we rarely see, hiding down below with the rats and sewer runoff. Do you understand what I'm saying? He looked baffled. No, ma'am. Never mind. She shoved back her chair and arose to go. Just bring me that key. You'll get the rest when you do. Mr. Bannock didn't seem to mind Joshua hanging about his office. Most of the time, Joshua sat in a corner, watching and listening. The busy newspapermen accepted him as part of the furniture. What they did not realize was that he was becoming well informed. He was picking up news before anyone on the street. Today, however, looked like a slow news day. Bannock sat behind his desk and lit a cigar. You say your friend Marina went east, did she? Yes. She did promise to write as soon as she's able. What do you think of this Lincoln fellow? Bannock blew a smoke ring at the ceiling. Your guess is as good as mine. Let's hope he's more competent than the last fellow in the White House. I should have given Marina a letter of introduction, Joshua mused. I'm sure the president would be happy to receive a friend of the emperor. No doubt, no doubt. When I was watching that ferry cross over the bay, an idea occurred to me. Why not construct a bridge over to Oakland? We could use Goat Island as a terminal point. Bannock smiled and said nothing. Yes, the more I consider the matter, the better that idea sounds. I may compose a proclamation on the subject. Why not? We shall be happy to publish it. That should make front page news. Joshua gave the floor a thud with his walking stick. I believe I shall go home and do so at once. He was only halfway home when the policeman arrested him. Sarah arrived at the rooming house on Commercial Street a short time later. She had the key firmly in hand. That copper had felt obliged to tell her all the trouble he'd gone to. I arrested him for vagrancy, he said. A right and proper arrest. The fellow was indignant, but he didn't put up a fight. More's the pity. Then I takes him down to the magistrate, who tells me I can't charge him as a vagrant because he's got $2.50 on him and a regular address with the rent paid up, 50 cents a day. So I had to change the book in. They're holding him as a madman. Will he be sent to the asylum? Sarah had asked in a bored tone. The officer shrugged. Dunno. He says the judge tomorrow. Sarah didn't much care whether the emperor went to an asylum or not, as long as she could discover his secret. At this point, she had a strong hunch she was about to do that. The emperor's landlord answered to her knock. He was in shirt sleeves and gaiters. She suspected he'd just awakened from a nap. Something terrible has happened, she said. Emperor Norton is under arrest. They are holding him in a jail cell. I have come over to pick up a few of his personal possessions. You do remember me, I trust. You know me for one of his closest friends. The man scratched his head, apparently trying to absorb this information. His room's locked, he said. Not supposed to let nobody in. That's quite all right. You won't need to. I have the key. A few minutes later, after some hemming and hawing on the landlord's part, she was turning the key in its lock. The room was tiny and sparsely furnished. However, it was clean, with no sign of clutter or unnecessary items lying about. Of course, she did not expect to find Emperor Norton's treasure concealed in this room. She did hope to find some clue to its location, perhaps a deed to a plot of land, or even a copy of his will. She was confident that if she searched thoroughly enough, something would turn up. She began by looking under the mattress. The closet was next, with its few articles of clothing. She searched in every pocket. The small writing desk was next. There were a few scattered notes, but nothing making any sense. Something about abolishing the United States Congress. She saved the chest of drawers for last, working from the top drawer downward. There were a few coins, a clasp knife, pens and pencils, a couple of threadbare shirts, woolen socks, and underwear. Finally, she came to the tin box in the bottom drawer. Sarah pried off the lid and peered inside. She carried it over to the one window so as to see more clearly. Then she took one of the diamonds between thumb and forefinger, holding it to the light. Not a bad fake, she said aloud. No doubt quartz. Of course, they could not be real. Only a true madman would leave so many diamonds lying about like this. If they were actually real, Norton could sell one and buy a house. She shook her head and replaced the jewels where she'd found them. She was disappointed not to have found what she was searching for. She wondered if perhaps Norton really was a pauper after all. Then again, perhaps she had simply been looking in the wrong place. She examined the room to make sure nothing appeared disturbed. Then she went out, locking the door behind. The landlord was snoring in the parlor.